Hello everyone and welcome to Cinderful Gaming. I hope you're all doing well, I hope you're all staying safe, and most of all, I hope you're all fighting that war against the Grey. Today's video, we're going to talk about force organisation in Warhammer Age of Sigmar, and does it need to change? There's a couple of issues around force organisation, and many of them can be, taken as spamming is an issue. There's issues with, unit comparisons between battle line not being, equal or being downright very far from equal. And this, I think, could all be solved with some changes to how we look at force organisation for Warhammer Age of Sigmar. Age of Sigmar's force organisation has stayed pretty much the same throughout its entire history, which is almost, next year coming up to 6 years of the game. We're going to have the same force org chart we had at the start of the game. Now, that's not to say that this particular force organisation has not served us well. However, I do think that now we are getting so many different armies with so many different variations of units throughout them, that this maybe is becoming a really bloated thing on just our sort of monsters and artillery off to the side, heroes as one allotment, and then battleline and other. So we're going to look at a couple of other game systems that I think have a force organisation that could do really well for Age of Sigmar. And we're going to talk about whether or not we think they're actually better, or if we think they could improve the game, or if they're indeed, just utter trash and we should never include them in Warhammer Age of Sigmar. I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on this. This has definitely been something that's on my mind and discussed in my local group on, do we have force org needs? Do we need to change up the game somewhat in this respect? And will this help address some of the issues we have with some units and armies spamming certain units, or particularly units that are problems within the meta being harder to take en masse, thanks to how this works? So without further ado, let's get cracking on and let's look at the first game system. Now, the first one I want to look at is Conquest, the Last Argument of Kings. I think they have an interesting force organisation in how their game sort of works, but also I think something similar could work really well for Warhammer Age of Sigmar. So how their force organisation works is, first of all, you take one hero, and then that hero has an options of different units within the army that you can take as a retinue alongside it. This is generally 1 to 4 units, and there'll be restrictions on some units. So you'll have unrestricted units, which will be a list, and then you'll have restricted units, which is another list. And in each sort of retinue alongside each hero, you cannot take more restricted units than unrestricted units. So you can have a maximum of 2 restricted units for 2 unrestricted units. Now, the interesting thing this could be is this sort of works well with how we look at Age of Sigmar. We would obviously need some slight changes, and maybe each singular hero unlocks 1 artillery, 1 battle line, and maybe other heroes, but this restricted and unrestricted based on a hero basis could be an interesting thing. You could have certain heroes require you to take certain units. So, say for instance you're taking a Nomad Prince because you want Eternal Guard as your battle line. They're an unrestricted unit, but maybe restricted units are things like Sister of the Thorn. But say in that same army you're also wanting to take Iron Drakes as well for your Cities of Sigmar list. They may be a restricted unit under, say, a Rune Lord, so which means you would have to take a Rune Lord and then a unrestricted unit. So, say something like Ironbreakers or Longbeards, and then have to take your Ironbreakers to unlock them. This puts more barriers of entry to get those problem units out, or those stronger units out into the game. You could do the same thing with Lumineth Realm Lords. Maybe that Sentinels only become available underneath particular heroes, so you have to take a Lord Regent to unlock Sentinels, and Sentinels are a restricted unit. And maybe, you could do the same thing with Bow Snakes, in that you have to take, say, a Bloodrack Shrine, a Melusai Iron Scale, or Bloodrack Medusa, and they are a restricted unit on the Bow Snakes. So you would have to take at least a unit of Combat Snakes. This, of course, doesn't change up the game too much, but it does mean that you could only have 2 units of Bow Snakes or 2 units of Sentinels, and then have to take another hero to get more than that. Now, this one doesn't particularly change the game too much, and maybe it's not quite the fix I was looking for, but it does have interesting sort of workings on how it could work with Age of Sigmar and sort of change up how we're viewing the game. That's my thoughts on this, because this one here could create some really interesting options for heroes. You could take lesser heroes and make units that are otherwise restricted for other options as unrestricted options. Bring those heroes to the table we might not otherwise see. So what are your thoughts on this one? But the other one here is really what I want to talk about now. So let's get into that. So the other one I want to talk about is Warhammer Fantasy. I really do think that the Force Org for Fantasy could definitely help us with some issues we're having with Warhammer Age of Sigmar. So first of all, we have heroes and lords, and we've already seen this sort of brought into the game in the fact of commanders and sub-commanders in the battalions. Well, what if our Force Org actually split these up and we were only allowed to take a certain amount of lords, which are our more powerful heroes, and had to take heroes, our sub-commanders, underneath them? This could be a really interesting thing to sort of split up some of the units to allow us and restrict us on taking multiple of these big things in armies. This could definitely stop some armies potentially being viable and could help us just alleviate some issues of doubling up on already strong units that are just monster characters. So you could put either with hard limits in just a fact of numbers, and I don't think this really does much more than what we're doing already. However, I think the percentage-based restrictions of, say, the early editions or Warhammer 8th edition of Fantasy would be much more influential in changing up how the game works at current. So, for instance, you could have, like we did in Fantasy, a hard 500-point cap on your lords. This would mean that certain lords would not be able to be taken, or certain characters counted as lords and heroes, or could use up both if you want to take the god characters. But this does definitely put some restrictions in how you can play with some armies. This would mean, a 500-point cap would mean that some heroes are impossible to take at those points. And maybe this would raise the overall point value of games, and we'd start to see more 2.5k or 3k games as a thing around this community. But you also have the core, special, and rare, and this is where I really think it could change up the game. Core units in Warhammer Fantasy used to just be your vanilla units, and that's what I really like about this. You could look at an army, say, like Lumineth, and at least, I think it's 25%, so 500 points of a 2k list must be core. Now, this is how you could work it with an army, say, like Lumineth. You could have your Wardens as core and maybe your Dawn Riders as special and your Sentinels as rare. But for every unit of Wardens, you could drop them down one slot. So you can have Dawn Riders as core and your Sentinels as special, potentially. And then your special restrictions come to the army is that no more than 1,000 points of your army can be spent on special units. So you're already here straight away sort of potentially capping, but that's if Sentinels become special, which they probably shouldn't. If they remain as rare, this means you would get 25% of your army to have as your Sentinels, so you wouldn't have a maximum of 500 points of Sentinels. This would, restrict them somewhat, because you would have to be having 500 points of at least Heroes or Lords, 500 points of core, and then 500 points of rare. So there's a hard cap on what units you can have in your army, putting in these percentage-based restrictions. I think a move to something like splitting up our units into 3 distinct areas of core, special, and rare would definitely go a long way to helping how we build armies and change up the game a little bit. But most of all, I think a percentage-based restriction on certain units with core, special, rare would definitely help in stopping some of the spamming of our more powerful units in the game. I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on this and what they think of Force Org in Warhammer Age of Sigmar. None of this is going to change overnight, but this was interesting sort of chatting and talking about how we think maybe it could benefit the game with some friends of mine. So, I'd love to hear everyone else's opinions on the subject. Well, that's the end of the video. Thank you all for watching. Please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you have not already. And also, why not drop us a comment below and let us know what you enjoyed about the video. If you'd like to come chat more with me and other members of our little community here at Sinful Gaming, you can do so by following the link in the video's description to our Discord server. Also, if you'd like to help support the channel more and in another way, you can do so either by supporting on Patreon or YouTube members. You can do either of these by following the links in the video's description, and as a special thing for everyone who does, we'd like to give a shout out first of all to our Patreons: Christian Weir, James Soren, Greenskins Gaming, AJC, Kenny Lowell, Outer and Shot First, Andrew Bowen, Nathan Fee, The Rising Ape, Q Dynamic, Agu, Anthony B, Anton Nilsson, JJ Austrian, Average Wargamer, Domer, Mark Harvey, James Cater, and Samuel. And a special shout out as well to our YouTube members, Greenrich Gaming, Kenton Young, Chris Wallace, Ronya, Vinny, Lockloric, the Johnny84, David Ellsworth, Revenar, Wolfric Nick, Broken Chef, and Sean Scott. Lastly, a special thank you to, first of all, Lady Witchfox Art, who does all the amazing artwork for the channel you can see here, and to Xmorphic, who does all the amazing background work for our Discord server, making sure it all works nice and properly over there. Thank you all for watching once again, everyone. Stay safe, stay well, and most of all, keep fighting that war against the grey. Ciao for now.